Alright, so let's take a look at one last example of what our work should look like today. So first off, before we actually graph the parabola itself, let's start to predict what we think we should get. Let's take a look at our coefficients A, B, and C. Now, A is negative 2, which means two things. One, negative 2 is less than our cutoff point, which is negative 1. So it means, once again, if you look back at your notes, it's going to be a fairly narrow graph. Not extremely narrow because it's not that far past negative 1, but it is going to be more narrow than what we would consider wide. Also means the negative means that it's going to be an upside down U shape. So we know we're going to get something that looks like that. Now B, once again, this is the tricky one. We mentioned this earlier in the examples. Negative 3. We have to pay attention to two things with B, because what happens here is that this shifts things left or right, but in this case it's the opposite of the last example because the graph is upside down. It's almost like turning your paper all the way around and looking at it upside down. So in this case, because we're looking at an upside down graph and B is a negative, it's going to shift things to the left. See, even I get confused with this because there's a couple things to look at. So because it's an upside down U shape and because this is negative, it's going to shift everything to the left. So I'm going to see this U shape, upside down U shape, more to this side than over to the right. And then C. C is positive 1, which hasn't changed. It's our y-intercept. So overall, what I'm looking for is a fairly narrow graph that is an upside down U shape, shifted over to the left more so than the right, and has a y-intercept of 1, which I'm going to mark right now. Okay, so now I can actually get to the graphing. Let's take a look. If this is x and this is y, we want to graph at least minimum of 5 points. Okay, because we're graphing a curve and not a straight line, we need more points to define it. So I always want to see on your work at least 5 points, if not more. Now the first one, though, we've already got. Our y-intercept is 1, so 0, 1 can be our first point. But now the rest is just plug and chug math. Pick some values for x, so since we're starting here, and since our graph is over more to the left than the right, I'm going to start with negative 1. Now once again, we just plug it in for x and compute what we would get. Now normally I would write out my work, I just don't have enough space here, so let's just do it. You can write your work out on the paper. Negative 1 squared would be positive 1. Positive 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. In the middle here, negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3. Negative 2 plus positive 3 would be 1, plus another 1 would be 2. So negative 1, 2. Let's keep going. Let's do negative 2 next. Negative 2 squared is 4. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. Over here in the middle, negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6. Negative 8 plus positive 6 is negative 2. Negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. So that would be right here. And let's do one more on the side. Let's try negative 3. If I do negative 3 squared is 9. 9 times negative 2 is negative 18. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. Negative 18 plus positive 9 would be negative 9. Negative 9 plus 1 would be negative 8. So we go across to 3, down to negative 8. And I think if I go any further, I'm going to go off my graph. So I'm going to go switch to the other side now. Let's try positive 1. 1 squared is 1. Times negative 2 is negative 2. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. Negative 3 and negative 2 is negative 5. And negative 5 plus 1 would be negative 4. So I can go across to 1, down to negative 4. And with 5 points, I think I can see it clearly enough where I can sketch my graph as best I can, trying to connect the points. And I get what I predicted. It's a fairly narrow graph. It's not too wide. It's an upside down U shape. It's shifted over to the left more so than the right, and the y-intercept is 1. So based on our predictions and based on what we got here, I can be pretty sure that we did it correctly. Alright, so you're going to show these same steps when you do your work that follows this tutorial. You're going to first predict what you think you're going to get, and then you're going to actually plug in points and actually figure out what the graph looks like dot by dot.